Welcome to StickTalk, another episode where we talk to hospitality professionals, what they do, what they like, and what they drink. I'm Holiday.
I'm Dee.
And I'm Chris Leung, whiskey advisor here at Jack Rose Dining Saloon.
Today we are at Jack Rose, Washington, D.C. They have the largest whiskey collection in the Western Hemisphere. And Chris, as whiskey advisor, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so just really wanted to take us through really different styles of whiskey that I personally enjoy, showcase a couple producers that I always come back to, and just find bottles that should hopefully actually be findable with how crazy whiskey is today as well. So with that, we can kind of start getting pouring. First one up is going to be a bourbon. In this case, I wanted to go with Old Forester 1920 out of Brown-Forman. Something that I think we tasted down in Kentucky together.
Oh yeah, it's Camp Runnemug. It was a great time.
Just a lot of fun down there, and I think that what's so special about camp is you never forget your first interface with the producer, and being able to actually put names and faces together, and really just kind of having that connection.
Have you been to camp, Dee?
I have not been to camp yet.
You gotta get out there.
Definitely, it's on my list.
Westlife, they do great things. Oh, it's drop Chris' name, you'll probably get an easy admission. Right?
Let's hope so. You can write your referral.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So you'll notice I always place a little bit of purified water in the droppers next to the pours. Basically, our whole methodology here is enjoying whiskey just how you like it. So we always kind of make all the tools available, whether it's a bit of purified water, whether it's some ice, and we'll present pours hopefully as naturally as possible. And then from there, whatever you feel comfortable with is exactly how you should be drinking that
pour. So what about, like, I was told, like, sniff one nose, sniff another nose, lift it up. I mean,
sure.
It's not all that detailed anymore. Or?
Yeah, well, we don't have to get that crazy, and I think I never want us to get so distracted by procedure that we're ignoring what's going on in the pour. Okay. And I think that so much of how I'm tasting is dictated by what I'm tasting for. Yeah. So if I'm on like a sensory panel, or if I'm sitting down and trying to deconstruct something, maybe we will water it down to 20% ABV, like we did over at Woodford. But really, when you're sitting down and enjoying a pour, the entire point is to enjoy the pour. So yeah, kind of my first rule is I will take my first nosing maybe an inch out of the glass or so, and that definitely is just making sure I'm not immediately burning myself out.
It's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And here we're at 115 proof. Both of you guys are really accustomed to drinking higher proof whiskey, but still, especially my first whiskey of the day, I can easily just overwhelm myself with alcohol, and then the rest of the tasting doesn't go so well.
I'm gonna go and taste because I do like Old Forester.
Yeah. I would say through this whole second part, my big rule of thumb is just take my time, maybe hold on my palate, and kind of be mindful. And that's really purposely vague. I think that you can get so much out of a pour, whether it's texture, whether it's flavor, whether it's kind of the sequential arrival of different flavors, and all of that's valid. So it's no use me telling you, what you should be expecting. The whole point is that you have a personal kind of journey through that, and whatever you're getting is totally valid.
So why the water?
So how much water do you recommend dropping in to taste it?
Yeah, so as with everything, the non-committal answer is it's totally individual to each drinker. But really, the mechanism that we're working with is really breaking apart the equilibrium and the whiskey at rest. So we basically have this whole bubble structure of fats that are not very soluble in water or alcohol. They tend to clump together, and when we introduce some water to the whiskey, we're starting to break those apart. So it's all about greater expression of those in the liquid, as well as introducing more of those into the vapor above the whiskey itself.
I actually like overproof whiskey, so I'm not going to go too much.
We always kind of start light, and then from there you can always add more.
So whiskey advisor at Jack Rose, right?
Yeah.
How do you get into that position? What made you go that route?
Sure.
You were in high school. You went to high school in Maryland. Was it Springbrook?
Yep, Springbrook.
My wife went to Springbrook.
That's right. I remember.
Yeah. My wife went to Springbrook.
So yeah, kind of been around the boatway my whole life. I really got lucky in terms of being hired here, and basically kind of fell into whiskey back in my dorm room in college.
Yeah.
And quite literally, one of my dorm mates and I would sit down, play some Xbox, and originally started off with a bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label. And yeah, it was.
That's not what I was drinking.
Oh, yes, that was
Yeah.
definitely not touching Johnny Walker. I didn't even know Johnny Walker.
Shout out to 99 Bananas.
Yeah. But I think so much of it was kind of like my path through whiskey was driven by the fact that I was still a college student, and I didn't have tons of money to throw at it.
Yeah.
So one Johnny Walker Red was an interesting start, but we felt that there had to be something more interesting out there as well.
Yeah.
And it would just kind of be like saving up for a month, seeing what we could get from the drive-thru liquor store just off campus, and just kind of buying a new bottle every time.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I basically learned just enough that way. I walked in a couple months after my 21st birthday and was like, hey, are you guys hiring? And I really, they very kindly told me that I had no real cocktail background, so I couldn't come on as a bartender. But I knew enough about whiskey that they were like, hey, we're looking for someone to actually be on the clock talking about whiskey, and you might be it. And just got
Such
filled
like
into
the
it.
whiskey song, which is called the advisor. I love it. Actually,
Yeah.
like whiskey advisor.
Thanks, yeah.
So are you the youngest whiskey advisor in the Western
I was gonna say,
Hemisphere?
that's a super.
I have no idea.
Probably the youngest one.
Yeah, I mean, coming back around, I would never want to claim to be a sommelier.
Yeah.
I like the fact that we use advisor, and more than anything, I would describe myself as kind of local guide. So it's not that I'm the most knowledgeable person in the world, but I should know personally this collection better than anyone else who comes in. And so much more about listening first, seeing what you personally enjoy or what you're looking to get into that particular night, and then we should know our collection and be able to connect to it with that.
And so, do you know this entire collection in here?
I would say that I've personally tasted about 95% of what we've got.
That is amazing.
That's amazing.
I'm super jealous.
Job.
It's not too bad. Yeah. I always say it's like trench work every night. You have to taste something new that's coming in.
Yeah,
And,
this is really cool. So, how long have you actually been with now, Jack Rose?
I've been here about 5.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So came in a little bit after 21, and basically just have been drinking whiskey and talking about it, and doing that.
So sometimes I know you probably can relate to this. Like as a bartender or a bar manager or a bar owner, like your nights just seem to like merge into the next shift, How would you suggest for bartenders to like make that time to educate themselves about bourbon, whiskey, and be more hands-on with the spirit?
Sure. I know that early on, and even now, sometimes I'll make my shift drink just like a whiskey.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be super expensive. We'll pull down either just a single malt that I haven't tried, or a bourbon or something like that, and just always try something new. I definitely have been called obsessive at some point, and I think that so much of this I feed off of just because whiskey was my hobby first, and then I got to do it as my job. So I really am lucky in that regard. But just kind of keeping that excitement going. I think also a big cornerstone for me is just learning about all the kind of undiscovered corners of whiskey.
Wow.
There's a lot of research going on, there's a lot that we don't yet understand, and I think that really keeps me curious in a different way as well.
Okay, so touching on the fact that this actually started as a hobby and then became your job. So initially you went to school for engineering.
Yeah.
And then did you do anything with it, or did you just fall into this passion of whiskey and engineering just kind of took the back seat of that work?
Definitely took the back seat.
Okay.
I actually left undergrad to try to start my own company, and this was actually my night job originally. So I was like working on that during the day, coming in talking whiskey at night, and unfortunately that completely folded, as most startups do, and this kind of became my full-time gig. I'm now doing a master's in distillation and brewing out of Scotland, so hoping to kind of connect that all back up and just kind of take that engineering kind of brain and apply it towards whiskey as well.
There's a lot of people actually come from the engineering background that get into distilling the brewing, which is why I was curious if you kind of had an idea. I think maybe you had a subconscious idea before you even knew that you were going to get into this, so that's actually really cool. But so the master's is out of Scotland?
Yeah, so Heriot-Watt University out of Edinburgh. They basically are the center for the Scotch Whisky Research Institute, and they work hand in hand with the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, which is kind of the accrediting body for brewing and distilling over in Scotland, or in the UK.
The only place you can get your master's in such a thing? really?
As far as I know, yeah.
That's the
I was
only
curious.
place.
I don't know if anywhere in the U.S. you can get your master's.
So we're gonna have to drop that link so that people can be informed.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, you can either take individual classes. I'll first get a 2-year postgraduate diploma, and then you can go for a master's thesis after that.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So definitely a great resource.
So we have what is next?
Yeah, so kind of working our way down the line,
Yeah.
I figured we'd pop into Rye Whiskey. I'm from Maryland. Rye Whiskey is kind of fantastically maybe the original American whiskey, and certainly so important to Maryland's history as well. In this case, we are coming from Kentucky. Wilderness Trail is probably one of my favorite producers in terms of smaller distilleries at the moment. And I just think they make a really fantastic rye, and something that's a little bit different from what we usually have as well. So here, this is going to be one of their single barrel rye whiskeys coming across at 113 proof. And there you are.
So quick for the viewers, so what's the difference between bourbon and rye?
Yeah. So what's really convenient about a lot of our American whiskeys is that the whole nomenclature is developed by the base grain for distillation. Yeah. It's like the whole setup makes it somewhat easy to understand. So bourbon is going to be 51% or greater corn as our base grain. Rye whiskey has to be 51% or greater rye. And then something like wheat whiskey would be 51% or greater wheat. Here, we certainly are kind of in the middle ground. And something that I really like about Wilderness Trail is that it now seems like we have smaller producers. They're not just capitalizing on novelty or not just capitalizing on being local, but starting to set themselves up for maybe the next 100 years and really thinking long term. Another big thing about what they do is that,
So good.
Wow.
it just is a slightly sweeter style of rye.
I was just about to say, what's the corn percentage in this actually?
Yeah, I think they do disclose their mash bill. Yes, we're looking 56% rye, 33% corn, and then 11% malted barley in the back end. And I actually really like that they have adopted sweet mashing as their standard procedure. And
So what's sweet mashing?
Yeah.
Please educate.
Coming back a step, basically almost every whiskey that we see produced is going to be following what we call a sour mash regimen. So kind of like sourdough bread, we're taking our finished ferment, getting some backset, exactly, and then feeding that into our next batch. What that's usually doing is giving us consistency in yeast strain, pH levels, and sugar levels over time. So we're not seeing great variance from batch to batch. With sweet mash, you're tossing all that out the window. You're starting from your base grains every single run of your still. And previously, that was really thought as, you were introducing either too much variance or it just wasn't feasible at volume. And I really love that they, as well as Peerless, have adopted it as every single run of their still is sweet mash. And I think it really gives testament to their attention to detail and just controlling the variables.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's some water, open it up a little bit.
Something that I'll kind of carry through as a theme here is that all of these bottles, I'm really always looking for a whiskey that's presented as naturally as possible. Not utilizing chill filtration. Within bourbon and straight rye, we don't have to worry about caramel coloration, but on the Scottish side we do. And then hopefully having it maybe at barrel proof or at least at a higher ABV. And then again, we can always add the water if we'd like, but we at least glimpse the whiskey as it naturally occurs first.
This is a great setup you have here. With such a large selection to choose from, what's your baby at home, like your prized possession?
Yeah.
What's the bottle that you probably gonna keep until your son or daughter turns 21?
The one you won't share with
Yeah, the one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I have a couple of those.
Yeah. I would say, well, first off, I am so bad about actually saving bottles. So the bottle that I mentioned is definitely open. It's definitely something that I have poured for guests at some point as well. But back when I was in my dorm room and back in college, I think my first white whale was Ardbeg Alligator. It was a limited release, of course, heavily peated single malt whiskey from Ardbeg. And when I first came in here when I turned 21, it was like $30 an ounce on the menu. To my 21-year-old brain, I never thought that I would spend $30 on an ounce. So I totally passed it by. I didn't actually try it until I was already hired here. And that was, of course, kind of like this fulfillment of,
of course.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And I eventually was able to find a bottle, squirt a bottle, and still have a bit. So it's something that always kind of meter out. It will always be nostalgic to me. And I think that's a great part of whiskey, is that you have those emotional connections to something that you drank one time with a friend or you drank with a family member, and that's so perfect about it.
I love that. Okay, so let's we talked about educational background a little bit. Let's talk about just background in general, kind of where you come from. And so, as far as like family and stuff, like are they into whiskey and stuff like that in the house? Did you kind of grow up with a lot of spirits and stuff in the home that kind of made you interested by the time you got to college? Because you were already a little, little astute by the time you got to college drinking Johnny Walker Red. So, did that come from uncle's dad?
You know, my parents are not big drinkers at all. They are now totally into whiskey. I would say especially peated malt whiskeys. But growing up, they were the sort that would like split a beer over dinner, or like we'd have a little bit of wine.
Okay.
And yeah, so not big drinkers at all. And I think if anything, you know, my whole approach into palate and into flavor, I just kind of grew out of being in my mom's kitchen. And you know, we did cook quite a lot together, or I would just be hanging out and she would ask me to help with things, and just kind of exposure to flavors and how they fit together. And I definitely just love food in general. So that definitely kind of, I think, developed just my love of.
But if your parents weren't drinkers, who liquor cabinets and ransack even like know what whiskey and bourbon tastes like? Or like a friend?
I definitely started on vodka.
Yeah.
Hard way.
I started
working my way up.
So my journey's been a lot longer.
Don't worry, I still had like my Natty Light next to whatever whiskey I was drinking. That was literally what we had. But it was, you know, I think it really began just as like a cool thing to be into.
Yeah.
Of course, whiskey was like just starting. We were watching
It sounds
Mad
so
Men.
sophisticated.
Yeah.
Like,
And we certainly didn't have any knowledge whatsoever of it, but it really was just that hook of flavor. And you know, more than anything else, and I think that all of my rooting in whiskey is flavor first. So how do we find things that excite us? How do you find those pours or introduce other people to those pours that kind of open a door and turn someone into like an 8-year-old in front of the T-Rex at the Natural History Museum? Just that like feeling of wonder, the feeling of I didn't know this existed before. And spirits in general, I think, are so perfect about that. You know, kind of looking at mezcal or looking at Armagnac and just everything. Yeah.
So, being Asian American and being like so knowledgeable in the field that you're in, right? Do you see representation, or like who inspires you? Did you see someone like, yo, if they're doing this, I can do that? Did you ever come across that situation, or?
You know, not a whole lot. And you know, of course, the Asian markets are massive in whiskey, so there's certainly a huge enthusiast or consumer base for it. You know, of course, you know, going on distillery tours, you don't necessarily see too many people. My own background, you know, I'm second generation Chinese on my dad's side. My grandparents there basically came over during World War II just because of all of the turmoil. I myself grew up very suburban, so I think it was a conscious choice for them to really kind of come to America, really make a very American life. Then even starting with my dad, things were, you know, very American, very suburban. Even
that's
though
a common thing with immigrant families in general, kind of wanting to Americanize and acclimate because of what they were trying to escape in the first place. So,
That said, I always got like 2 Thanksgivings. It was like original Thanksgiving, the day of, and the day after we always went out for dim sum, which is the best thing in the
Well, I
world.
said which food was better. I don't know.
I mean, I can't answer that.
Oh yeah, now on camera. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
So does that influence any other type of whiskey you like seek to educate yourself on? Do you kind of seek to get into more like Asian spirit and stuff like that that comes out of? Do you seek stuff that you really wouldn't be able to get here, or as far as like mainstream market or anything?
You know, I would say that it's more about finding something new in general than necessarily targeting anything.
Okay.
I would say right now, of course, Japanese whiskey is so massively popular, and I think that, you know, a big stressor there is making sure that we always have like the proper legislation in place as well. And so in Japanese whiskey, it can be a little bit confusing because now we have rice-based whiskeys that internationally wouldn't necessarily be called whiskey, but here in the States, because rice is still considered a cereal grain, they can be sold as Japanese whiskey, as well as the fact that we do see some Japanese whiskeys blending in Scottish malt as well. And so there's nothing wrong with any of those. They all taste really fantastic, but just making sure that the consumer knows exactly what's in the bottle and that we understand kind of where Japanese whiskey is coming from and just kind of know what we're buying before we're purchasing it for what can be quite a bit of money as well.
When you're not drinking whiskey, what are you drinking?
A little bit of everything. You know, I am very happy with a big old gin and tonic. Yeah, I actually had like an entire summer of tiki drinks and French spirits. I mentioned Armagnac. It was just, I think that you can find fantastic Armagnacs for not a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And just, yeah. So I would say, yeah, especially over the summer, I think those are like my big hits.
Okay.
Just, yeah, something a little bit new.
Yeah, what's next?
Yeah, so coming down the line, we are moving then over to Scottish single malt whiskey. Here, I absolutely love Kilchoman, and really this particular release. Yeah, so Kilchoman is certainly a slightly newer distillery in Islay. So Islay is the region of Scotland that's traditionally known for heavily peated malt whiskey. And in this case, they only started up in 2005. So let's see, we're looking at 14 years of age. But the amount of ground that they've really covered is stupendous. And I think this particular bottling is so fantastic to talk about. So here we have their 100% Islay series. Kilchoman remains the only distillery in all of Scotland to own a farm adjacent to the still. So what they do for 100% Islay is this is the only Scottish whiskey release that is grown on site at the distillery, malted 100% on site, and then of course distilled and bottled on site as well. There are only 2 distilleries in all of Scotland that are releasing whiskey that's 100% malted on site. That is Springbank and Kilchoman. And I think beyond just being really tasty, it represents an entire curation of process that we no longer see on the market.
And this one, there was no coloring either, right?
Yeah, no caramel coloration. All other bottles are without children. Yeah.
I'm not a big Scotch girl, but that's really good.
It just is. I think it represents a slightly sweeter style.
Yeah, sweeter. Yeah. The peat's not as strong as like I would just more.
I was just about to say the peat's not turning me off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which in a lot of Scotches it does. I love that.
It's a great item.
Wow.
Sure, yeah. It's amazing.
I feel spoiled right now.
I think that a lot of our decisions on how we make whiskey for the past 50 years have been marching towards how do we make it more consistent, how do we make more whiskey with more available grains, or how do we make it more efficient. And I think now that we have this popularity in whiskey, we kind of take a step back and just say, how can we make it more flavorful? How can we make it more specialized? And just create something that people haven't had before.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to see the industry really take that in stride. And not just look at the commercial side, which is important. Distilleries have to survive financially, but really stressing this idea of, how do we move forward in terms of flavor as well.
So usually, after a hard shift, I like to go and relax and drink a glass of whiskey, right? But now I'm trying to be more about self-care. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I spoke on what I do for self-care. What do you do for self-care to get you through the shift so you're not burned out a week into the new year?
Yeah. Definitely packing snacks. I remember I got made fun of by our GM a while ago, just because I was always the guy with the granola bar sitting in the stairway.
Yeah.
And as much as I love our burger, I would crush our burger in 5 minutes every single night. But you also just need, I always need that granola break, just something that I'm not getting angry behind the bar, and immediately just getting totally in the sticks with it. Besides that, just trying to stretch, run, it is so hard to get yourself up in the morning and do something before work. And yeah, I'm sure all of us can kind of feel that. But it does help me to get to sleep at night and just kind of making sure I'm getting good rest too. Yeah, and taking days off drinking too. Just kind of every now and then. Yeah, just kind of be hey, I'll go with tonic or just a little bit of beer.
Do you find yourself having to do a lot of consumption as far as in a regular shift? I know when you're educating others, you're having them taste and you're walking them through things and stuff like that, but are you typically having to throw it back and taste as well? Or do you, because you already pretty much know the collection of what to expect from it, you really don't have to do that much drinking?
Yeah, and so I would say, the ground rule no matter what is that we have to stay intelligible. We have to speak quite a lot in a night. So that kind of eliminates already a lot of consumption.
Yeah.
We definitely do always want to have sincere tasting notes. So our whole approach is if you are not familiar with a pour, if you haven't had it in 2 years, you take it down, you can take a small sip or do a tasting, and then that way you're able to properly inform a guest as to what's going on. I don't necessarily consume a whole lot during a shift because of those kind of two together and the fact that I've been here for 5.5 years now. And especially, if I'm at volume on a Saturday, I can't be pulling everything down, tasting it, and then going out with it. So yeah, just kind of a mixture of making sure that I know what's going on with the pour and that I can articulate what's going on. And then we do always have the door open too. If you don't know, make sure to take another tasting.
Being that this is Jack Rose, right, in DC, a lot of legends have walked through here, right?
Yeah.
Who are like some of your mentors, and in the same breath, who are you a mentor to?
Sure. I think what's so great about we are a fairly large bar. We happen to get a lot of people coming through, and really the energy, just everyone feeds off of one another. So whether it was like way back in the day when I first got hired, of course our beverage director was Trevor Fry. He was working with Nate Lowe and like Dram and Grain and that whole experimental cocktail concept downstairs. Dram and Grain is now over in the basement of the Imperial, and even in a bigger space, in a more fantastic space. I think that the two of them, of course, Benny Hurwitz and Andy, they definitely came through. And Andy Bigsby, I should throw in his last name as well. And he is now our creative director for both buildings. And the two of them kind of took over the helm of Dram and Grain. And I think just in so many ways, just introduced me to cocktails. And of course, as I mentioned, I was so useless in cocktails before this. So in a totally different way, it was just opening doors for me. Later on, Morgan Kirchner, who is our wine director over at Imperial, was one of our whiskey advisors for quite a long time as well, and extremely knowledgeable on so many different facets. She came from a wine background and a culinary background originally. So her approach to taking culinary approaches or deconstructing a dish and putting it into cocktails, or her wine knowledge, which I can't even touch, are all things that I think I kind of integrated as well. So, I consider all of these people friends, and I will have drinks with them. So it's not that it is kind of always like a big teacher kind of top-down mentality. But I think that everyone kind of jams off each other, and that's what's so fantastic about having a building like this.
Do you have anyone now under your wing or you're like mentoring?
I would say Joey Jameson is one of our other whiskey advisors. He's absolutely fantastic. I think a big criteria for us in terms of hiring advisors is just excitement and sincerity. And he can get anyone to smile with a pour in front of them and just bring, I think our approach here, and something that I learned when I was like going through Spain. I'd never been to Spain before, but someone articulated the difference between Catholicism and its architecture and Islam and its architecture. As with Catholicism and the cathedrals, it was this feeling of being small in front of something that you can't touch or you can't fathom. Whereas Islam, so much of the architecture and so much of the feeling was built so much more around a personal experience and making it more intimate. And those are completely subjective as to what you want out of your spirituality. But I think here we want to take these large walls and immediately make them really intimate and personalized, and make it feel like you don't have to be a certain someone to be in here drinking whiskey. And I think Joey's absolutely fantastic about doing that.
We'll do something special for us next, right?
Yeah. So really what I wanted to do here is the fact that even if I don't have a cocktail background, I can still mess about and blend whiskeys. So I really wanted to take 3 bottlings that are findable. All of these are sitting on liquor shelves around DC in terms of different liquor stores. But how do we then make something a little bit different out of that? In this case, I wanted to root my whole orientation in a whiskey that I fell in love with when I first actually started at Jack Rose. So Brora is unfortunately a now closed distillery that existed up in the Highlands and is actually kind of the brother or almost parent distillery for Kleinowich. So Brora originally stood just across the street from where Kleinowich now stands and ran a lightly peated malt whiskey from the Highlands. In the 1970s and working into the 1980s, Diageo or United Distillers really divested aggressively away from peated whiskeys, especially those not coming from Islay. So these two did actually exist side by side for a little while, and Kleinowich Distills were a carbon copy of what existed at Brora, but Brora unfortunately closed down. So here we're kind of taking the waxiness, the floral qualities, and almost a tropical sweetness that we see in Kleinowich, and messing around with it a little bit. So kind of Kleinowich 14. I think it's a fantastic standard bottling. This is their entry level. This is what you can find at any liquor store, and it's just a fantastic whiskey altogether.
You said they had, some sweetness and some floral notes in there?
Yeah.
So are they produced at a high elevation? Is that why it's a little floral, or where?
So,
do you know where as far as geographically?
Yeah. So they're not necessarily at a super high elevation, and for me, with those flavors, I think the signature of Kleinowich is its texture, is that waxiness, kind of an oily coating quality. And in a great way, so much of that is actually down to bacteria existing in the ferment. as well as just kind of almost the uncontrolled or not entirely understood aspects of distillation or fermentation. So it might be lactic acid bacteria that are at the end of the ferment. It might be even kind of just what's going on in your distillation process. I've heard some rumors that there was kind of this gunk in Quino which distills for a while. They took it out, the whiskey tasted off spec. So it tasted actually worse when you took that out. And yeah, how do you just kind of understand all these things, but also integrate them into your process and be open-minded in the fact that, of course, fermentation, we all know about dunder pits and just how kind of uncontrolled but also fantastic and integral to the process this can be. And how do we make sure that we're balancing cleanliness as well as the fantastic parts of fermentation. So then we're going in with Hazelburn. Hazelburn is the unpeated distillation coming from Springbank down at the Campbellton region of Scotland. Springbank is the other distillery that I mentioned, malting 100% of their barley on site. So here they're not burning any peat during the malting process, but it really is maintaining that fantastic mineral component and just the salinity that we're looking for that gave us such a fantastic backbone in Brora. So here we're looking at a 1/4 ounce on top of that 1 ounce pour. Move these over just a touch. And then finally, because of course Brora was lightly peated, we're going in with Lagavulin 12. And so, of course, pretty much everyone knows, whether through Parks and Rec or whether through marketing, the standard 16-year-old bottle. I personally love the 12-year-old because one is presented at cask strength, so a bit more naturally. We're getting more of the character of the distiller coming through. It also is kind of in some ways the whiskey that got me hired. When I came in, as a 21-year-old, this was the first bottle that I ordered. And it was something that I wanted to try for quite a while. I didn't want to commit to, this is about just over $100 either in Maryland or maybe a little bit more in the district. And to me at 21, that was a lot of money. So it was that entire idea of like try before you buy. And yeah, kind of the whiskey that got me hired, or at least, started the interview process, I guess. So really, I'm actually gonna grab a bar spoon for this. So we're gonna go in really light. You can say maybe half a bar spoon, but even less than that. Drop that in. And watch it spread, of course. Sure. So again, I think that Lagavulin 12 is a fantastically aggressive whiskey, and so whenever we can kind of use it in moderation, that should be the right amount. So there you go.
So now that you've been here 5.5 years, and you've expanded your cocktail knowledge just a smidge, if you had to make me a cocktail right now, what would be your go-to?
Right now, it might be a Vieux Carré. So yeah, of course, kind of whiskey base. I do love French spirits as well, though. And I think that, of course, I always default back to something sort of boozy. I feel like that's usually kind of my safe place or what I come back to. Basically, in the summer, it's a Boulevardier. In the wintertime, I go a little bit heavier with a Vieux Carré. And yeah, just kind of, it's a nice warm blanket together.
Okay.
Chris, you are on your way to being an amazing master blender and distiller, because this is amazing.
This
is in a
delicious.
bottle, and oh my god.
So
It's
with
sweet,
the
it's smooth, got a little bit of peat to it.
yes,
Oh man.
with the masters in brewing and distilling, what's the goal? What's the dream?
Yeah, so ironically enough, I'm always asked whether I would like to be a distiller, and honestly, I can't imagine chaining myself to only one brand or only one still. So I'd much more rather kind of mess around with things like this. And yeah, how do we take all of these fantastic flavors that I love off for a wall and maybe create something a bit different? We do have plans to have a rectifying license as a restaurant group over in Gilbert Park.
With the rectifying license, what is it?
Yeah.
The license to do?
So basically, it allows us to mingle our own spirits and sell them both on-site as pours as well as off-site as bottles.
Oh, wow.
And that's the really big
So
division.
you can do what you just did there, bottle it and sell it?
Exactly, and we would be purchasing our own casks. We probably would not be taking standard bottlings like this and of course just mixing them together. But yeah, just really fiddling around and hopefully working with synergy and just finding something that hasn't been bottled before. And again, presenting it really naturally and just kind of getting people excited.
That sounds like a really fun job.
Nice.
I like that.
I like it, yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much, and thanks to Jack Rose and
Yes,
DC.
this has been amazing.
It's been amazing. I feel like my knowledge of whiskey and bourbon has just leveled up.
You've definitely elevated quite a bit as far as Scotch goes.
For sure.
Thank you.
Again, thank you. And that's the end of this
It's a wrap.
episode. It's a wrap. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.